France has overwhelmingly passed a controversial anti-hooligans law that cracks down on protesters in response to months of yellow vest rallies. In the latest demonstration on Tuesday, yellow vests marched with striking trade union workers in Paris in a protest over the cost of living. Auntie Charlotte Dubinsky was there for us.
Well, it seems like there's been a big turnout for this nationwide interprofessional strike called by France's largest union, the CGT. Now, they're here to protest things such as they want a raise in the minimum salary, they want the retirement age to be 60 here in France. They're generally against the reforms made by President Macron's government, but they've also now added a new thing to the list, and that is the fact that they are against this new anti-casseurs law. This is this anti-hooligan law that it's known as, something that's been brought in by the government in response to the yellow vest protests that we've seen rocking the country over the last few months. Now, that anti-casseurs law, the anti-hooligan law, is unpopular. Anybody who goes to a protest and covers their face could face up to a year in prison and a fine of 15,000 euros. That's because the authorities say that they want to crack down on those people who've caused destruction and violence at the yellow vests protests over the last few months, and as a result of that they want to be able to identify them. But others say if you go to a protest and there's tear gas all around, you want to have something to cover your face to protect you from that tear gas, and people here in the protests are very unhappy with this new law.
This law against the rioters creates questions. I find it a bit appalling. I guess it's a complicated issue. Will they detain the real rioters? That's the real question. Or will they just pick up any yellow vests who trip, fall, and when they get back to their feet, boom, the police are taking them down to the station?
The law is quite tough. I assume it doesn't need to be so strict. But at the same time, it's important to avoid a total crackdown. We need to limit the number of disturbances. We have the right to protest, but without rioting.
We saw scuffles breaking out between the police and the protesters. We saw some of the protesters digging up some of the rocks on the street where the roadworks were taking place and throwing those towards the police. At first, what we saw in response was just the security forces trying to push back in a bit of a cat-and-mouse game. But later, as the protesters, as those on strike, got here to Place de la Concorde, we saw the police then responding with tear gas. As you can see, tear gas now coming down behind us, a result of that tear gas, which is now all around us. And it's not just protesters here in France who seem to be unhappy about this law. There's even been criticism from the Human Rights Commissioner for the Council of Europe, who suggested that idea of making it illegal to cover your face in a protest could be degrading civil liberties. But the government, particularly the Interior Minister, Christopher Castaner, has defended this law, saying it's necessary.
This law is not intended to prevent demonstrations. On the contrary, it aims to protect them. More than 1,200 police officers and emergency workers and nearly 1,900 yellow vests have been injured since the start of the movement. To do nothing is a free pass for some to wreak destruction at each protest.
Well, that law has now been passed by French MPs in the National Assembly, much to the horror of many people in France who feel that it will erode civil liberties. Also, criticism that law could erode civil liberties coming from the Human Rights Commissioner for the Council of Europe. For the moment, people remain out on the streets and they remain unhappy with many of the policies of the government of President Macron. Charlotte Dubinsky, RT, Paris.